Good morning. What can I say now? And what can't I say? This isn't even a philosophical exercise. It's a genuine question. What could I say now that would get me taken off air? Or would prompt such an enormous backlash that I'd be frightened ever to revisit the same territory again? I'm pretty cool with backlashes as it goes, but, imagine I wasn't. What could I say now that was legal but career-ending? Shall we try? No, probably not. My kids need shoes, after all. But what freedoms can I exercise? There are things I could say that would upset my boss to the point where I would jeopardise my livelihood without having crossed any lines of illegality. There are things I could say which could upset a huge proportion of the people listening to this while absolutely delighting another, and you'd end up perhaps with a 48% breakdown of people clamouring for my blood and people cheering me to the rafters. I could cause grave offence to people who believe certain things. I could cause grave and, in my view, unacceptable offence to people who are certain things, who are possessed of certain immutable characteristics. Things that they cannot change, even if they wanted to, that I could direct discriminatory abuse towards. And that would be horrible, but largely legal. There is less that I can do within the parameters of legality today than there were when I started this job. I'm not entirely sure what. Ofcom regulates some of it, the broadcasting regulator, but they will censure a presenter on a commercial radio station and possibly fine their employers, even if no laws have been broken. But we're aware of legislation governing what's routinely called hate speech, without, even when you do this for a living, being fully cognizant of exactly where it is. Various profoundly unpleasant individuals know exactly where the line is. They manage to just dance along it without ever crossing it until, of course, they do cross it, at which point they end up in prison or in court or in very, very hot water. And they can come from all ends. They can come from all angles. On this programme, for example, we resisted the temptation of allowing people like Little Tommy Ten Names, or I've forgotten his name. What was the name of the sort of media's go-to Islamist fundamentalist and Jem Chowdhury, who I once encountered backstage on the Alan Titchmarsh show on daytime ITV and found myself thinking, this fella is probably getting too much freedom of speech. So what can I say? I think I can say more or less everything that I would ever want to say. And there's another problem, because that will inform in some way my view of what freedom of speech actually is. I say freedom of speech, you think freedom of your speech. You don't think freedom of my speech, you think about the things you want to say and whether or not you could say them. Has anyone ever sued for being called a racist? That would be interesting. That's probably the closest I come to potential libel, is when I call people actual by name and call them racist. But, I do it with people who are so obviously racist that it would no doubt trouble a courtroom for about 2 seconds flat. But if you are a racist, maybe you feel your freedom of speech is compromised. You feel that you're not allowed to stand up and say that, despite the fact that you're a profoundly inadequate individual who couldn't punch his way out of a wet paper bag either physically, intellectually or emotionally, you believe that you are somehow innately superior to, for example, Marcus Rashford because he's black and you're not. Is your freedom of speech curtailed? What about lies regarding COVID? Freedom of speech regarding absolute nonsense about vaccinations and viruses. How damaging can that be? How dangerous can that be? We always reach for the line about shouting fire in a full theatre or in a full cinema. And the idea is that your freedom of speech is curtailed, your freedom of speech is curtailed by the damage that exercising it could do to the greater good. So if you shout fire in a theatre full of people when there is no fire, then the stampede for the exit could cause untold casualties. But of course, you're perfectly entitled to shout fire in a crowded theatre if there is a fire. So even there, the freedom of speech is confused and or confusing. Here's a racist called Liz, who writes, "Dare you to pull Rishi Sunak down like you did Boris," projecting her own racism onto me, thinking that I would somehow be less likely to criticise Rishi Sunak because he's brown than I would Boris Johnson, who is, of course, white, albeit of Turkish extraction. So, racists don't understand freedom of speech because they think everybody else sees the world like they do. Do listen to this program for 30 seconds and you will hear me denigrating everybody and anybody possessed of pungent right-wing views, regardless of their ethnicity, whether it's Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, James Cleverly, Rishi Sunak, Nadine Dorries, Dominic Raab, or any of the rest of them. So you crack on, Liz. Thank you for the early wave there from Idiot's Corner on my inbox.